Life's a loose cannon as the cameras roll. All the world's a suffering nest, aching souls. Mr. No keeps jang in his greying clothes. Out here at the edge of the fire, planning to shame, planning to blame, it's all true. I said planning to pain all this tiresome game, lived out by you, lived out by you.
Hello, and welcome to the School of Enlightened Selfishness, and we are going to really deal with that today. We're dealing with the questions of transformation, and the question of transformation, well, that question today is where are you? You know, where are you? Where are you is one of those absolutely extraordinary questions. The thing about it, though, is that that whole business about where are you is not something that you begin your life with. It's one of the most important things about understanding the nine-centered being, and at the same time being able to understand the dilemmas that we face in our own process. Because so much about the nature of the future, so much about its possibilities, so much about the possibilities of the unique being in the future is about the relationships that develop between beings in their bonds. Now, what does that have to do with where you are? Well, first of all, let's go back and review for a moment the correct development of a nine-centered being. That is, you're raised with parents that are aware, that understand your nature, that nourish you according to that nature, and that ultimately educate you within your first 30 years to the tools that you need to be able to operate correctly as yourself, strategy and authority. That combination of proper nutrition, that movement into the correctness of decision-making, all of this answers a fundamental question of who is going to be in charge of this life, our first question. Without understanding this, in other words, without getting to this place in which who you are is something that is established in the verity of what it is in essence to be you, in other words, the byproduct of being raised correctly and operating correctly as a being, it's only when you know who's in charge that you can find out where you belong. Now think about what that actually means. The first thing that it says is that in terms of the correctness of a nine-centered being and the way in which it moves in its evolutionary process in its lifetime, that the whole question of bonding or mating is something that cannot even begin to be broached until they get beyond their Saturn. In other words, you know, the formula of the seven-centered being, which was that the moment that any of those seven-centered beings reached sexual maturity, they were already, you know, placed on a trajectory that would lead them to bonding, to that mating that was going to produce offspring. Most of that was taking place between the ages of 15 and 18. There was a time that if you were not bonded by the time that you reached 20, it was assumed that there was something wrong with you. This was the pressure that was there in the seven-centered life. Of course, out of that, you can see that the bonding mechanism was not one that was substantiated by any particular awareness, let alone that these beings were not self. Now think about the nine-centered being. It is clearly laid out in the way in which the nine-centered being matures that it is only when they get beyond the Saturn, that is, it's only when they get to approximately 30 years of age, that they have this opportunity to be able to plant their cross. In other words, to begin their journey, their true journey as themselves. Now, you begin that true journey as yourself. At that point, that's the point that environment becomes a key in your life. Now, what I mean by environment, in human design, language is very specific and terms are very specific. Environment is a term that we associate with the necessary overall physical environment that best nurtures an individual. When we are looking at the design side and looking at design information, we have two things that we look at, what is called the internal and the external. The internal is associated with the sun, earth, And it is fundamentally about our brain system, and it is through examining the internal that we discover the proper dietary regimen in somebody's design. When we go to the nodes of the moon, they are referred to as the external. And everything about the nature of the nodes of the moon is that this is what aligns us literally to our lives, our lives. It is along this line of the nodes that we live out the formula that is there for us, the storyline of what our life is going to be. And in the same way that the internal nourishes the inside of the body, the external provides exactly the right environment for the outside of the body. Now think about the nature of the nodes and this outside world. It is along this line that you move, and thus it is along this line that you are intended to meet the other. Not simply intended to meet the other, but intended to meet what is the correct other for you. And I'm not just simply referring to mating, to friendships, to associations, whether they be business associations or personal ones, whatever it may be. It is along this line that one meets the forces that one is intended to meet and forces that are correct for one to meet. Ultimately, within that lies the opportunity to be able to bond with the other that is correct for one. This point of beginning the Saturnian, post-Saturnian process, this line is a movement that goes all the way to Chiron. That is, it's about 20 years. It is during this 20-year period that an individual is able to develop their unique life and perspective. And it is only in this phase that they are ready for the trials, if you will, of what it means to bond with another and go through that process. Where you are becomes one of those extraordinary questions. And it says a lot of things about how we misunderstand the way in which life is intended to unfold, and how many human beings suffer as a consequence of that. Think about it this way. If you think about the way in which reproductive process works, what we get to see is that in the bonding process is designed to produce pentas, that is designed to produce transauric form, the byproduct of that bonding, what we call family. And it is one of these things to understand about the nature of this conditioning force, this deep, deep conditioning force, is that this conditioning force is going to be rooted in, if we are dealing with the ideal, the correctness of the adults. Let me give you an example. My partner and myself, we both have the same environment. That environment is called shores. In other words, it is very, very important for us for the nourishment of our lives, not the inside, but the outside. What nourishes us best in that sense, the beings that are going to be the ones that are going to be correct for us in our process to meet, that takes place in that environment. We met in that environment. As a matter of fact, we met literally on the shoreline. Now we have children. And as it turns out, both of our children, their environment is mountain. Mountain. Now, mountain beings are beings that need to be in high places. It is very important for them. It is very important for them to take the high ground. It is very important for them that is their environmental value, and the high ground is always going to nourish them. And yet, they come into the lives in the penta that is our family. They come into the lives that are dominated by the adults, who in our particular case happen to be in the correct environment. But this is not a negative for these children. It's not. You see, environment is not something that is important until that being is ready to live fully their own life as themselves. This is what the first Saturn cycle is about, to nourish that correctness in that being. And that then, and only then, where to go is not a question of which place, any more than what to eat is not a question of what kind of food. It is all about the way in which it is simply designed for you. These environments can be anywhere. You know, the reality is that if you can take advantage to a minor level with environment, that is, for example, if my children aren't feeling well and they're mountain children, then you take them up to a higher floor. It'll help their healing. You know, this is one of the things to understand about how important it is for us to become aware of the fact that it's not just about nourishing the inside, you got to nourish the outside. And you nourish the outside by being in the right environment, because only in that environment can you actually begin to live out the possibility of what it is to be you. What metaphorically I call the planting of the cross, to begin this process of finally beginning to fit into, like a costume, to be able to fit into what is your incarnation cross and to fulfill the purpose inherent in that. But you have to be in the right place. You have to be in the right place, and this is not something that, you're going to know. It isn't something that your not self mind is going to figure out, oh gee, I got to be in the right place. Where's that? It doesn't work that way. See, one of the most extraordinary things about being us, I talk a lot about the fact that the nine-centered being is here to express the most sophisticated cognitive potential of any species before us. I mean, after all, this is what we're about. We are about awareness. We are about cognition. And you have to understand that in order to be able to have the kind of potential, it is our gift to be able to have the map, to be able to see how it works. This is one of the extraordinary things about the mechanics of the Maya, that is to be able to understand how a mechanism works. These are mechanisms. I mean, I know you want to be attached to it, but they are mechanisms. And I mean, if you really feel an attachment to it, well, then treat the mechanism correctly, but understand that's what it is. The human design is simply a way of being able to understand our imprinting, to be able to see clearly, what is there so that we can take advantage of it. It is so easy for us at this stage to be able to look at somebody's design and say, this is the kind of dietary regimen that would be correct for them. And at the same time, it's just as easy, because these are just formulas in the mechanics, to be able to look at the external, to be able to look at the nodal configuration, and to be able to point to what environment is correct. This is the beginning of the whole transformation of a being into a unique, aware force. See, it's something to consider about the nature of all of those of you who have met human design, like me, as deeply conditioned beings who are raised incorrectly, who are raised by parents who are not aware in this context at all, that other than the fact that we are, genetically predisposed to being different, and in that very difference we find loopholes and manage to bump into different things. The fact is that we all began this deeply conditioned. And what does it say? It says very clearly that until you come to that place where you can be your own authority, that you cannot begin this process of truly fulfilling what is your destiny, your fate, your karma, the lines that are there for you. You cannot fulfill them until you're in charge. You can't. To be involved at the deepest levels of human design is to go far beyond strategy and authority. Strategy and authority saves you from the program. It allows you to enter into your world, your process. But you see, we weren't born as correct nine-centered beings. We're not raised correctly as nine-centered beings. This formula that is laid out for correctness is not one that we can particularly follow. Everybody wants to be able to live out their cross and their purpose and be aware But you have to understand where this starts. You know, you cannot just have it. You have to live it. And most importantly of all, you have to live who you are. You have to live through that strategy and authority. If it is correct for you through that strategy and authority, as somebody who was once conditioned, to enter into a PHS dietary regimen, then it will be another additional benefit for you to finally be able to give to your vehicle the nourishment that it deserves, and the impact that that can have on you physically, mentally. But you have to understand something. This is the school of enlightened selfishness. It is very, very, very difficult for human beings to be selfish in this way. It sounds good, I know. It sounds good because it's the truth. And there's no clouded stuff in between it. It's a straight line. But to get there, you have to shed this seven-centered world around you. The way it operates, the way it thinks. You truly have to leave behind your dependency on the other, whatever that other may be. That is not for everyone. It is not. You know, this is quite a step to take. To truly be selfish. And not in any possible negative sense of that word. Because whatever you're going to have to do with human beings in the rest of your life, all those others in the rest of your life, better that they meet you as you are, than you suffer the conditioning that they suffer and never get the possibility. But you see, it takes a great deal. It takes a deep, deep determination to transform your life. It takes a deep, deep understanding, knowing, or belief that this is more important than anything else. Because if it isn't, it will never happen. It will never, ever happen. You know, the vast majority of human beings who will meet and embrace human design on the surface, their lives will be made better by following their strategy and authority. But no matter how grand the numbers may be of those beings that embrace that, to go all the other way, all the steps that are there, to go through the full transformation, not having been born to it, raised to it. You see, if you're born to it and you're raised to it, it isn't anything. It's just your life unfolding. But we've all been conditioned, deeply conditioned for most of our lives. In order to deal with that, you really have to see you either totally let go of it or stop fooling yourself that you think you're going somewhere. See, each step takes you deeper into yourself. Strategy and authority is the first time that you become an authority. And you become an authority with a wisdom that you've never had real access to because you've never paid attention to it. And you begin to see that within yourself there is this incredible force that is there. But that is a force that has never been nourished. Never. Never. When you enter into your strategy and authority, the first thing you're told is sleep in your own aura. You know, it's the first step into enlightened selfishness. It's to understand that you don't need the other while you're sleeping, but how they deeply, deeply, deeply distort your whole process. That you never get to be you, nor do you ever get to see what you are with them. Just to take that step for most people in the world? Nah, you know. I remember the look on the faces of all the women I've done readings for, thousands and thousands of them, saying to them, you know, you need to have your own bedroom. And they would smile for a moment, just the idea of it, the wonder of it. And then, of course, deal with the reality of it. You see, in order to be you, you have to be you for yourself, not for somebody else, not for somebody else, for you. See, every step along the way, that's just the beginning. Dietary regimen. Dietary regimen is a wonderful thing. Oh, it is amazing what primary health system brings into somebody's life. But boy, to do that, what it takes to do that. We have so much social stuff wrapped around food. You cannot, in that sense, you know, walk away from everybody, you know. Think about what it's like. People, they date over food. They do business over food. They socialize over food. But you see, what all of them are eating at that moment is a homogenized delight. And it has nothing to do with who you are. And you see, if you're not ready to nourish yourself correctly, what does that say about you? I mean, how come you're not going to look after yourself, you know? Why is it that you think it's so difficult to give yourself the best possible nourishment? Well, you're going to give up giving yourself the best possible nourishment so that you can get gas and diarrhea and all kinds of things because you're socializing with a whole bunch of people eating homogenized food in a way that's not good for you and you feel terrible afterwards? Was it worth it? See, if you can't be selfish, you can't be you. And it's not selfish at the expense of anyone. It's not selfish to hurt anyone, to do anything to anyone. It's not about anyone. It's just about you. What's good for you. When you live what's good for you, you get what's good for you. So you take that step, strategy and authority. You sleep in your own aura. You eat the way it is correct for you to eat. You will notice, by the way, by that point, that there are certain people that aren't in your life anymore. You'll also notice that you don't care, which is kind of cute. An environment. You see, this is when you establish yourself to be where you belong in the world as yourself. Because where you are is all about where you can go, what you can be. It's about the beauty of living out your story, your story. See, most human beings, you know, I love to use the analogy of the movie. You know, most human beings are in the crowd scene. I mean, that's what they are. They're in the crowd scene. You know, maybe if they're lucky at the end of the movie, after 8,000 different names have appeared, maybe there's a tiny, tiny little thing. They're all in the crowd. And they all get one general direction from the director. Move right slowly. That's what happens when you don't get to live out your life, your storyline. You're just under the direction of the program and you go along with the rest of the lemmings. Because that's what you get. You don't want to be in the crowd scene, lost in the program. not even recognizing for a moment what it could be, what it might be to be here. That you're put to sleep every night by the dreams of the propaganda machine of the not-self world. That you have to survive on fantasies. You see, we all have a magnificent story to live. Magnificent. Thousands of them. Thousands of them. Hundreds of thousands of them. Incredible stories, each with fabulous nuances, and it's us. And you never get to live your movie if you're not correct. You can't. You can't. Life is navigation. If you're not moving correctly, you're going to miss what's there for you. And you will get the homogenized direction, nothing else. Where you are. Your life begins with where you are. But it can only begin when you know who's in charge. So that you can operate correctly as yourself in an environment that's correct for you, so that you're nourished on the inside, you're nourished on the outside, and you get to flow down that line of your particular trajectory without resistance. That you take on the mantle of whatever your purpose happens to be. We are here to be deeply aware creatures. It is what we're for. We are not seven-centered savages, dressed up savages, killer monkeys. This is not who we are. It is not what we are about. We are about awareness. And we are a species that is given the potential of living life without fear. Without fear. Fear haunts everyone. So afraid. Afraid of everything. Afraid of everything. And you see, the moment that you are living as yourself, the moment you discover that you can trust this vehicle deeply, deeply, the fear goes away. We are so beautifully equipped for this life. But you have to earn that. We are not the children that are going to be raised correctly. If you want to find this way, if you want to live your life, then it requires a deep, deep, deep discipline, a deep dedication to this process. There is no other way to get there. And it means you have to learn to embrace what it means to be enlightenedly selfish. It is so through that you can, in return, remember this is about us in relationship to the other, that what you give along that line, the outer authority, the beauty that is possible in you, in your life, in your awareness, in the way in which you live, and most of all, in the bonding that lies before you, the lovers and friends, the correctness of what your life can bring you, its joys, its beauty, its pleasures. We are not here to suffer. Don't suffer. Follow your strategy and authority. Find your way. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that. And until next time, bye for now.
There goes Mr. No in his black attire, strung out between the word and guitar desires. Now you're at the edge of the fire. Out here at the edge of the fire. Out here at the edge